We all know that Swami Vivekananda had tremendous veneration for Buddha. We also know that Swami Vivekananda was a Vedantist. He not only studied Vedanta, he had the experience of Vedanta, which is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. He had this experience in the first quarter of 1886. Of course, he then wasn't known as Vivekananda. He was still known as Naren. Now, Naren, in the month of April in 1886, along with two of his brother disciples, went from Calcutta to Bodh Gaya. One day, they were meditating inside the main temple at Bodh Gaya, when Naren saw very clearly a ray of light emanating from the statue of Buddha and entering into the soul of Tarak, his brother disciple. So out of emotion, he got up and embraced Tarak. This is one event. Long before this, when he was an adolescent boy, he was meditating in a very special way one day. This special way was to purge all thoughts from his mind and then meditate, which is very difficult. After the session of meditation, he was sitting in his room, when according to him, he saw a monk who, piercing in the southern wall, came inside. The monk had an air of tranquility and indifference to all things around him. The monk was gradually approaching him. He was frightened and he ran out of the room. Then he thought that he had made a mistake, that this could have been a message. So he went inside the room again and he found no one. Throughout his life, he believed that he had encountered Buddha on that day. Now again, we know that Vivekananda, even when he was known as a Vedantist, and even when he was a world famous, solemnly declared that Buddha was a shining image of Vedanta. Vedanta talks about Atman and Brahman, and it talks about the identity of Brahman and Atman. Brahman means an entity that englobes everything. Atman means the innermost essence of an individual. Vedanta says this is the only reality in the whole universe. All other things are not really real. Whereas Buddha used to talk about Anatman, meaning no Atman. So, how to reconcile this? Buddha, before he had his Bodhi, was known as Siddhartha Gautama. He went to a teacher known as Alar Kalam, who taught him Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya philosophy talks about dukkha, suffering, and that spiritual quest begins with the fact that we are being pounded with three kinds of suffering. Another thing Alar Kalam taught him was that the embodied soul, which is called the Jivatman, is the Paramatman, that is the highest Atman. Buddha's teaching was that everything that is there in Jivatman is fleeting, meaning it is not permanent. So, he declared this theory of Anatman. Now, ordinary Vedanta accepts Jivatman, but it is ordinary Vedanta. When Vedanta goes to a different level, it says that this Jivatman was a willful superimposition for the understanding. Jivatman is not a reality. Paramatman is the reality. So we're really never born and we really never die. What is born is a body and a mind. In the Parliament of Religions, a representative from Sri Lanka, Anakarika Thermabal, suddenly announced, "I am inviting Swami Vivekananda to the dais to criticize Buddha." It was a trap, because he couldn't criticize Buddha publicly. So he would expose himself as a Buddhist. Swami Vivekananda came to the dais and said, "I am the servant of the servant of the servant of Buddha. There is no question of criticizing him." But his tragedy was, he was not understood by his own disciples. And India's fall is due to the separation between the brain of the Brahmin and the heart of the Buddhist. He used to quote from Metta Sutta, composed by Buddha. Mata yata putam ayusha ekabuttam anurakhe evampi sava bhuteshu manasam bhavaye apiramanam. The mother protects, even with her life, her only son. Bring in yourself that mother heart in respect of all beings, and your compassion should be boundless. What does a person do? How does he conduct himself after he understands that his Jivatman is the same as Paramatman? Vivekananda replied that he sees that same Atman everywhere. So he has a tremendous compassion, and Buddha was talking about compassion. If we don't have a link with other person, why should we have compassion? We do not have any compassion for a stone. There is no meaning that I have tremendous compassion for the stone which is suffering from scorching sunlight. For example, a mother feels tremendous compassion for her child because she thinks that she is there in the soul of the child. If you feel it for everyone, you are enlightened then. And Buddha talked about this tremendous compassion. Siddhartha went to the palace of King Bimbisara, and found that a big sacrifice has been arranged. So he took one of the goats on his shoulder and went to the king. He said, "Please kill me instead of this goat. At least one goat will be saved." The king was very much overwhelmed by the attitude of Siddhartha. He asked him to stay in his kingdom. Siddhartha said, "No, I'm going on my way to seek liberation." Thank you.